Okay, so today we're going to look at axe sheaths. The star of the show here really is this Nic Westermann spoon carving axe. It's a beautiful bit of steel. I've put a handle on it and I'm selling this one. It is sold. I have no more. I have no more. Let's put it like that. So the first thing I like to do when I'm prototyping a sheath is take a flat piece of card, lay the axe on, and then draw gently around the outside to give the shape of the axe. That gives me this internal perimeter to work with, and then what I've done is I've measured at specific points to give me the welt line, which is drawn in by hand for the outside perimeter of the sheath. So this one's a prototype, but we decided not to go with. The trouble with this strap configuration, where there's a fixing here, is when you've got these swept heel and toe axes, you can't physically take them out of the sheath if you welt across the bottom as well. So what I was going to propose was having a snap closure here, but the customers decided to go with more of a traditional folded over type design. So having done that twice, I arrived at this shape for the axe, where this piece will fold over. I've reconstituted it here because I've used the components to make the template that's actually gone on the leather. So what I've done is gone from that stage, cut around and arrived at this stage, then put that back on another sheet of card, which has given me a template to work with. I've then done that 3 times, once for the front, once for the back, and once for the welt. Now the welt is a third layer of leather that goes in between the front and back panels and protects the stitching from the sharp edge of the axe. So having done that, I've then cut away the tab line that I want, which is then going to fold like so. And I've arrived at this point, which is the tab and the back panel together. Out of another one of the templates that I drew, I've cut out the welt, and then that is the other panel. Now this one you would see is slightly different. I've cut away a little bit of excess leather at the top of this panel just to allow the sheath to fold over, and that was done after I transferred it to the leather. So this allows you to do some assembly. I've done that around the axe and just tried everything out. You'll also note that I've added an extra piece in here, and that's because this is very thin leather, very thin card. The leather's thicker, the blade of the axe gets larger quite quickly after the bevel, so you do need a little bit of extra to allow these shapes to come together as you intended. So what I've done is I've taken those 3 components and transferred them onto leather, and I do that simply by tessellating them efficiently onto the leather and then taking a biro and marking out around the template. And I found the biro on the flesh side of the leather works really well for that. So once you've marked everything out and cut to the lines nice and neatly, you arrive at having 3 components. And it's worth noting that if you draw this the wrong way round for the corresponding template, the front or the back panel, you can end up with 2 flesh sides to get 2 flesh and skin side together, which isn't ideal. So you just need to make sure to remember to flip over your template for one of the panels. So yeah, having got these components together, what I've then done is taken my groove tool, set a distance. I've taken the fact that the outside lines are all pretty much equal and use those as a reference point to put the grooves in. One thing to note with the welt is the welt is grooved. The welt is also punched. I've grooved twice to give a nice deep groove on the welt, and the idea behind that is that when you bring this all together, you'll be able to see that there's nearly a centimetre of leather to get your needles through. Those 3 layers together make stitching quite difficult, so I'm just giving myself as much advantage as possible. Now, in terms of the marking of the stitches, what I like to do is use a pricking iron like that, and what I do is I choose a reference point, and here it's this corner where the 2 groove lines intersect. Again, hoping that I've done a good enough job to reference all these sides and the shapes are the same. So once I have that 0 point, I then mark out the stitches, and what you'll see is that I've actually punched all the way through. That's a personal preference thing. Again, with these thick leather sandwiches, it just gives you another advantage, because one other consideration is that I'll be putting some contact adhesive on here, and that can just make stitching really awkward, and you've spent all this time making a nice sheath and then you mangle it trying to stitch it. So I just put a bit of extra time in making sure that all 3 components are punched all the way through. I use this configuration of pricking iron, it's the only one I've got, and I don't mind the widening of the holes that you get by punching through and then having to wiggle it out. So the next stage here will be to use some contact adhesive to put the welt onto the back, and I'll use a pin or an awl to make sure that the reference point is lined up, and that will be glued together like that. And then when it arrives next week, I'll put some water on this and then dye this down to a dark brown colour before doing the stitching. And obviously when I stitch, you'll have 3 layers together all in one. Before I put the top panel on, I'll need to do the hole for the closure in both here and the tab, but I've got to wait for the snaps to arrive to see how big the posts are before I punch that hole through. So yeah, that's my approach. As I'm an occasional leather worker, I've taken some of the problems that I perceive in the process and then worked backwards from there to try and mitigate them. So spending a little bit more time getting the outside shapes to work well together, and this reference point, and also punching through with the holes. That's something that I've seen people not doing on the YouTube videos that I've seen. So I hope that's helpful. It just gives you an idea of flavour of the process that I've been through. I had one last look at the Nic Westermann axe, and please remember this one is sold. I don't have any more. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you're interested in One Day Woodcraft, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and on onedaywoodcraft.co.uk. Thanks for your time.